Frame Raider.
The Casio PV-1000, an exclusively Japanese home console from 1983, pulled off the shelves within weeks, only to have 13 games in its library to show for it, and a total sale of approximately 9,000 units. And yes, this is the same familiar household company known for creating watches and calculators. While 13 games are known to exist, speculation is that 2 more might be out there. In particular, each game has a code. 2 number codes are missing from the complete set, hence why we're only aware of 13 games. These 2 games are rumored to be Frontline and Galaga. Why specifically? Well, there was a successor to the PV-1000 known as the PV-2000, a slightly superior, more computer-based system that was released 2 months after the PV-1000. Despite this closely linked release, PV-1000 games were not backwards compatible. This system had some improved variants of the original's library and happened to be home to both Frontline and Galaga. What confuses me is that there are more games than just those 2 exclusive to the system, so why speculation always goes in the direction of those 2 being the unreleased PV-1000 games is beyond me. Perhaps there's some more insider information that I'm unaware of. Multiple sources I've found claim it to be these 2 games, so I can only guess they have a reason to believe so. Galaga in particular looks very smooth compared to the PV-1000 library. I don't think it's much of a stretch to say it wouldn't have looked this good on the PV-1000. Graphically, sure, but I'd wager a frame rate far worse than what you see on display here. Ultimately, the Casio PV-1000 is almost completely forgotten these days, especially if you live outside of Japan. Why did it live such a short life? Well, you can assume for multiple reasons, mostly from it being released 3 months after the largely popular Nintendo Famicom system. Strangely enough, this wouldn't be Casio's final jump into the console market. They also released the Casio Loopy more than a decade later in 1995, and while that wasn't nearly as much of a failure, it still wasn't a success. We've covered all that we need to, so now it's time to look into those games. Amidar. As with a decent selection of the PV-1000 library, this is a game based off a pre-existing game. In particular, Amidar was an arcade game where you'd obtain points by collecting dots surrounding various rectangles, all the while dodging enemy threats trekking around the board. Collect all the dots surrounding the corner pieces and you'll activate a power much like Pac-Man's Power Pellet, where you can eliminate your foes on screen for a short period of time. The fire button allows you to temporarily stun enemies and even walk through them, which is good for getting yourself out of a close encounter. This version of the game is missing some graphics, like when you complete a rectangle outside of the 4 corners. Also, the main character has only front-facing sprites, unlike the existing arcade game. After completing a stage, you get the chance to collect an extra apple, Psycho Fox Maze style. This game is the best music on the console, and I think that speaks volumes. No pun intended. Dig Dug. Well, this is by all means the worst version of Dig Dug I've ever played. In fact, this might be one of the worst arcade ports I've ever played. In Dig Dug, you navigate underground, freeing space as you dig. When encountering an enemy, you'll need to launch your pump into them to blow them up by hammering the fire button. More than 50% of the time, your pump doesn't work. The character is extremely slippery. It is so easy to come face to face with an enemy and immediately encounter a cruel fate. At least the enemies react accordingly to their source content. Wasn't expecting that with the lackluster presentation of the rest on show here. Hello, it is Frame from the future coming back to correct a thing. So I'm fairly certain this only applies for this game, which could be wrong, but according to someone on my Discord, who happens to own a Casio PV-1000, surprisingly, says that this is playing too fast. One video I've seen online may suggest that it is playing too fast, although I'm pretty sure it's still being played through an emulator. You'll be able to see that on screen right now. I can't verify what the correct speed of the game is, we will only find out when someone posts gameplay footage of it directly from the console. However, I still do not think that this is a great port. Nonetheless, it is definitely not anywhere near as abysmal as it would be here, and it still has its issues, I imagine. So I will change this from bad to good, because it's still Dig Dug, but it's not a good way to play it. Dirty Chameleon. Well, this is some of the most tone-deaf music I've ever heard in a console game. It sounds just like it came out of a Tiger LCD handheld. So what do you do here? You use your tongue to kill the chickens. Also their eggs, because like with Joust, they'll hatch if you leave them for too long. Eliminate everything, except the weird penguin creature throwing baseballs at you, and then you go to the next stage. You can use your tongue additionally to travel from one platform to another, which is not a good thing in this game because since that is also used as your weapon, it'll often land you far too close to your enemy as you are trying to attack them to end up on another platform by mistake. It isn't just that, but navigation as a whole is a chore. The Chameleon gets stuck on every corner if you don't know exactly how the game wants you to control it. Excite Mahjong. I can't claim to have any idea how to play this. Fighting Bug. While called Fighting Bug for the PV-1000, this is actually an arcade port of the game Ladybug, which is itself a bit of a Pac-Man clone like Amidar before it. This one more so, however, since your only objective really is to collect the dots on the screen. There are twisty platforms you can use to block off the enemy bug's path, of which by the way are extremely tardy and only show up once the screen is basically finished. Funnily enough, they often run into death traps before they even manage to get close to you. I was playing the game for roughly 6 minutes before any actual difficulty started to kick in. This had the potential to be excellent if it wasn't so darn easy. Maybe this would be a better choice for the younger audiences? Naughty Boy. In this game, you simply have to make it to the end of the screen and light the castle flags on fire. Doesn't get much closer to a lost Five Nights at Freddy's minigame than this. The controls for this one are strange indeed. To fire your weapon, you can't just hit the fire button. You have to hold it until the square on screen lines up with your intended target. Almost like this were a game of Battleship. But no, it's a platformer, kind of. Also, despite the character always facing away from the screen, the direction you move in determines the direction of your fire. This makes it pretty confusing to get a grip on. Also, the enemies are really fast to nab you. Put this all together and you get a very frustrating first screen. Yeah, enemies only seem to appear on the first screen. Once you pass them, it's smooth sailing to the flags where you may burn them as you please. It's entertaining, but no doubt needs some work. Pachinko UFO. It's a Starship Enterprise-shaped pachinko board, I guess. Holding down the fire button determines how far you'll shoot the ball. There's no gauge or anything to keep track of how far you're shooting. It also appears as if no matter how long you hold, there's always some element of spontaneity to it, which is good. I just don't get why it's so dang hard. Honestly, I only on very rare occasion got a ball into the winning slot. 95% of the time it just wants to slide off, and as far as I can tell, there's no element of skill here whatsoever. Top this off with a low frame rate and physics that are just negotiably physics at best, and you've got a pretty pointless game. Pooyan. I guess you're some kind of finch bird protecting your territory from wolves on balloons. Shoot down their balloons at the right moment to succeed. The number on top determines how many wolves are left until the next wave. Now and again a large missile appears at the top that you can use to take down multiple. I'm not sure what the pattern is for this game. Shooting down the balloons seems to be only successful at random, since once they've dropped their shields it doesn't seem to make a difference as they just put it right back up again. It's very repetitive, but I suppose after fully familiarizing yourself with it, it could be fairly entertaining. I mean, this has to be a popular arcade game for a reason, right? I take it back, this has the best music on the system over Amidar. It's far less annoying. Probably helps that it's based on a familiar orchestral piece that I can't recall the name of. Can't say it sounds great, just good for Casio PV-1000 standards. Space Panic. I mean, it's basically Mr. Do's castle, but strangely more disturbing. The sound effects are also low-pitched and almost menacing. Was that intended? Anyways, dig holes and wait for the Pac-Man ghosts with antlers to hopefully fall into them. Then smack them with your hammer to brutally slay them. I'm glad there's no fall damage here, it makes navigation so much easier. This game may not look like much, but I did have more fun playing this than most other games on the system. I just feel like the audio has no right to be this unsettling. I do prefer this game on the ColecoVision. Super Cobra. Wow, yeah, I don't like this version of the game at all. The enemy attacks are so irritating to avoid. There's such a thing as engaging difficulty, and difficulty that's just annoying. Like, for example, you move so slowly, but the enemy missiles are so fast. It feels inevitable to die sometimes. Also, landing a shot with your land missiles is so finicky. If you want to play Super Cobra, or any of those similar games like Scramble, you're just better off not playing it here. Not like you would anyways, it's a Casio PV-1000. Do you have one? Turpin. I always find it kind of unsettling when pixel art games try to give a more realistic presentation of animals, with long limbs that simulate authentic movement. Anyways, you're a mother turtle looking for its children that were, I suppose, locked away in these mystery boxes? I like to think of it as you being an addicted gambler, who keeps buying into these mystery boxes when all of a sudden you're thrust into an awkward situation where one contains an actual living child. Congratulations! You've been awarded with responsibility! That slow reveal isn't helping. Sometimes a mystery box will have another enemy inside that will roam the environment as you try to find the rest of the turtles. After you do find one, you have to make your way to the home building shown somewhere on screen before you collect another. You can deploy some kind of stun bomb that lets you move through an associated enemy that lands on it temporarily. This might be my favorite game on the console. It's actually a lot of fun, even if the music is a bit irritating. Tutankham. Ladies and gentlemen, the lost Serious Sam indie game. I mean, think about it. It takes place in Egyptian tombs, there's monsters everywhere, and you can deploy a serious bomb at your disposal to get rid of all active enemies on screen. The goal is to collect a key and open the door at the end of a stage. Eventually, you'll need more than one key to progress, and you can only hold one key at once, so you can imagine how hectic this can be. As you can imagine, the game feels very akin to a Sokoban-style maze throughout. Collect some goodies on the way as you zap the bad guys who dare cross you. Oh, and they dare. But so too do you as you charge towards them. You don't have a choice, you just keep moving in one direction until you collide with a wall. If that by itself were changed to allow the freedom of stopping at your discretion, this would be the best game on the console. Literally, that one drawback keeps this from being as recommended as I'd like it to be. Of course, there are other drawbacks that still hurt the experience, like only being able to shoot horizontally at any given point. I will say this game has the best sound effects for the system. It sounds fairly similar to something you'd expect on the Famicom. Warp and Warp. It's basically Berserk meets Robotron. I don't think there's a better way to describe it as it perfectly blends the two games together. Just run around this square environment and shoot the monsters who will have no issue shooting back at you. You can, however, deflect their projectiles with your own. You have free range of the environment, which is funny because of how they attribute the sprites. They basically just rotated the character for the associated directions. Each time a round starts, you'll see the enemies outlined in black surrounding the playfield. Once those all disappear, every enemy is spawned. Rid of them, and the next round begins. It's simple, but fun. So that's the Casio PV-1000 library. What I think? Well, I'd say the library has potential. Every game here could have been alright. The multiple duds it has are mostly the result of bad controls or strange mechanics. Additionally, a lot of games have in common that unless you know what you're doing, you'll die almost immediately the first couple times you play. But by no means am I implying those games are bad. Some quality of life improvements would dramatically change their element of engagement, I think. Of course, there are still a few I'd steer clear from altogether, like Pachinko UFO and Super Cobra. Games like this can be okay, but the limited framerate capabilities make entries that rely on smooth scrolling near impossible to enjoy, which again makes me curious how the suggested Galaga port would really play on this thing. It must be said though that in the long run, had this console tried to prove itself, it wouldn't. The Famicom was too much of a beast. All I can theorize is they were already into the development of the console and figured they'd at least give it a shot to see how it would do. I guess they weren't impressed with the receptions and honestly probably anticipated this even as they released it. The whole thing feels like an attempt, a test of the waters. Can we achieve greatness in this market? It was a very noble attempt, but in 1983 it just wasn't enough to succeed. Special thanks and shout out to Juggernaut for helping me to get the PV-1000 emulator to work. He has his own video on the system from 3 years back that you might enjoy if you like this one, so feel free to give his content a look. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you Frame Raiders in the next video.